In this demo, we will take a look at how to define subprograms with AuthID definer and current user clauses and examine their effects as far as privileges and external references are concerned. We will also examine the effects of an invoker's right subprogram calling a definer's right subprogram and vice versa. I am currently logged in the demo schema. Here, I am showing the definition of the getEmpCount function, which takes in pdptid and returns a number. It is defined with AuthID definer clause. We first print using dbms output inside getEmpCount in the demo schema. Then we select count star into lcount from the employee table for the past department ID, fetching the count in lcount, which then we return. Let us compile this. Here, we have a function updateEmp, which takes in pdptid a number and plocation a varchar2 variable. We have defined it with AuthID current user clause. We define lcount, a local number variable. Inside the execution section, we update the employee table, setting the location to plocation for empdptid equal to pdptid. Using dbms output.println, we print the number of rows updated. We commit the transaction. Then we call the getEmpCount function, which we just took a look at, which returns the result in lcount variable. We finally return lcount. Let's compile this. Now here is another worksheet where I am logged in as a demo user. Let us first see the count of employees table in the demo schema with department ID 1. There are 2 rows. Now here is the anonymous block where we declare lcount as a number. Inside the execution section, we call the updateEmp function, passing in department ID 1 and location WA. We then print rows in department ID 1 is and then concatenate it with the value in the lcount variable. Let's run this. UpdateEmp, being an invoker's AuthID clause function, updates the count in the employee table, printing rows updated for department ID 1 is 2. Then it runs the getEmpCount function in the demo schema, showing the function gets resolved in the definer schema, which is demo. It returns the count of department ID of 2 as expected. Let us grant the execute on updateEmp to test. Here, I'm in a session logged in as the user test. Let's first create the departments and employee table in this schema also. Let's not insert any row for department ID 1 and insert for department ID 10 and 20 instead, and employee records in those departments. Let's run this. Everything went through successfully. Here again, I'm in a session logged in as the user test. Let's also create an identical function getEmpCount in the test schema. Here we are printing inside getEmpCount in test schema to identify that it is the function in the test schema being called. It operates on the employee table in the test schema. Let's compile this. Now here is another test session. First, let's check how many rows are there in the employee table in the test schema where department ID is 1. There should be no rows. As expected, there are 0 rows for department ID 1. Now let us run this anonymous block where we call demo.updateEmp function, passing in department ID 1 and location WA. Let's run this. Demo.updateEmp is an invoker's right function, and so the update to the employee table happens in the invoking schema, which is the test schema in our case. Since there are no rows for department ID 1, the number of rows updated for department ID 1 is 0. Next, the getEmpCount function gets resolved in the demo schema from the output. It runs as definer's right and counts the employee in the demo schema for department ID 1, which will return rows in department ID 1 is 2. So only the external references in the DML and dynamic SQL statements gets resolved in the invoker schema, but direct calls to the unqualified subprogram names always gets resolved in the definer schema. Now back in the demo session, let us change the getEmpCount function to be an invoker's right function by using the AuthID current user clause. Let us compile it. Running it in the demo session will give us the same results as before, since both the definer and executor of the functions is demo, and the employee table in the demo schema will be operated upon by both the functions. Let's run it. We see the same results as before, where rows updated and selected in department ID 1 is 2. Let us run it from the test session now. Since demo.updateEMP is an invoker's right function, as before, rows updated for department ID 1 is 0, as there are no rows with department ID 1 in the test schema. As before, the getEmpCount function inside demo.updateEMP will get resolved to the function in the demo schema. However, since it is now also defined as an invoker's right function, inside it works upon the employee table in the test schema, which is the invoker, and now gives us the result of rows in department ID 1 is 0. So the external reference to a function in a standalone call always gets resolved to the one in the definer schema, here demo, but if the function is also an invoker's right, then it again looks up in the table of the invoker as here in the test schema. Now here in the demo session, let us modify the updateEMP function so that instead of calling getEmpCount as a standalone function, we call it as a part of a SQL statement. So we call it here as select getEmpCount PDPDID into lcount from dual. That will make it evaluate the external reference in the invoker schema. Let's compile it. Now we are back in the test session. Let's run the anonymous block again. This time, as before, rows updated for department ID 1 is 0, as demo.updateEMP is an invoker's right function. But now, since getEmpCount is called as a SQL select statement, it gets resolved in the schema of the invoker, which is test, as indicated by the inside getEmpCount in test schema dbms output statement. There, as expected, it will find rows in department ID 1 to be 0. Now back in the demo session, let us modify the updateEMP function to be defined as AuthID definer. GetEmpCount is defined as an invoker's right function. Let's compile this. Let us now see how the resolution happens when updateEMP, a definer's right function, calls getEmpCount, which is an invoker's right function inside it. Let us now go to the test session and run demo.updateEMP function. Since demo.updateEMP is a definer's right function, the employee table in the update statement will get resolved to the employee table in the demo schema, printing rows updated for department ID 1 is 2. Even though the getEmpCount function is defined with AuthID current user clause, since it is called by a definer's right program, it will also run as a definer's right and will get resolved to the demo schema, where it reads the employee table in the demo schema, printing rows in department ID 1 is 2.